I think with anyone who works with any individual is like a 20-year-old versus a 30-year-old versus a 40-year-old versus a 50-year-old. A lot of it comes down to like things that are ballistic in nature, or just total training volume. You know, how much they can seem to handle. So why is that a difference, or why is that so different?
I see the question now. So what it generally means is it's not, but what you have to do is probably progress to that volume differently.
Okay.
So what that means is a 40-year-old can probably handle almost the same amount of training as a 20-year-old if you took the same time to prepare them for that volume.
Okay.
So that would be, you probably need a little bit more time to prepare them for that volume. So for example, if we took and we'll just pick this sport just because the numbers make sense, but if we take distance running, so marathon running or half marathon running, whatever you want. And you say, okay, someone who wants to do a marathon is probably going to run 40, 50 miles a week. Okay, maybe more, maybe less, but let's just say to make numbers easy. Well, if they're 40 years old or if they're 20 years old, 40 miles for a competitive runner is not very much mileage. Mm-hmm. But if that person had never run before and their first week out, you stick them on 40 miles, well, the 20-year-old will probably handle it and be okay, but you would break the 40-year-old.
Right.
So it's not the mileage that got them, it's how well you progress them from their previous point to that new point of volume.
Okay.
So if you take a 40-year-old or a 50-year-old, and this is a great example, we just finished a study with 2 monozygous twins. So these are monozygous means they are identical twins, meaning they have the exact same DNA.
Okay.
So they're clones, like literally they're clones. The only difference between them is what they've done with their lifestyle, right? Your physical activity, because you have the exact same DNA.
Right.
Well, they're both in their 50s, and one of them has done a bunch of Ironmans, marathons, and things like that, and he's been consistently doing endurance activities since he was in his 20s. This is 35 years. Mm-hmm. And the other twin is sedentary.
Okay.
Well, the trained twin...
What are the odds of finding that scenario?
Dude, you have no idea.
Yeah.
But the trained twin has run something like 40,000 miles.
Jeez. In
the last 30 years. So if you break that down, I don't remember the exact thing, but he has like handwritten training logs of his entire life.
Yeah.
And so we went back and calculated it, and he's easily doing 40 or 50 miles a week, most weeks.
Yeah.
But his trained twin, we had him jog like 2 miles, and he's like, my knee, my ankle, and he's crippled.
Right, yeah.
So that is not a genetic issue. It's not an aging issue. That is simply a preparation issue. This guy had 30 years to get prepared to handle that volume. So you can't expect somebody to be ready to handle this massive volume in 4 weeks. Like that's just not going to do it.
Right, yeah.
So it's a progression issue more than it is a total volume issue.
Okay, and now I guess the application of that to strength sports, is it roughly the same? Like is like the I guess like the, I get people say like the compounding nature of like a squat or a clean or anything like that. Like that doesn't play an extra factor into it?
I mean, look, we're not going to say that they're the exact same.
Right, of course. But
here's the deal. The vast majority of overuse or any other types of injuries are movement problems.
Yeah, yeah.
The muscle can handle it, but the joint may not handle it when it's not moving in the way it's supposed to move, and now we compound that with volume, load, intensity, fatigue. I mean, you name it. Mm-hmm. So I would say you absolutely can do cleans, you can front squat, you can do whatever these things you want, as heavy as you want, as often as you want, for the most part, assuming you're in good positions the whole time.
Right.
Where that beats you up is if you're not in a perfect position.
Yeah, and I guess the kind of stereotype of age with that would be, a standard person jumping into this for the first time at age 40, they're probably not as flexible as they could have been when they were younger, which means they're going to be putting more stress on their joints because they're not able to get in the correct positions, which is actually the problem.
Yes, exactly. Don't blame the exercise. Don't blame the clean or the whatever, pick your exercise. Blame the fact that you're just not in good positions, and then you're asking them to do it with load and things like that. So what the real difference is, it's not any safer for the younger people, but the younger people can just deal with it better, and they won't notice as big a deal.
Okay.
So with the aging, it's nice because as they get a little bit older, they get effectively what you're getting is more direct feedback.
Right.
This is like, I did this. Oh my gosh, my knee's killing me today. Well, okay, you probably weren't moving perfectly then. But a 20-year-old may not have noticed that knee bothering them until five weeks later.
Yeah.
But it's the same movement problem. It's the same movement problem. The same injury happened. You just have the means to handle it.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, yeah, that's also like, I mean, that makes so much sense because we do have a 20, I believe he's 23 years old, a weightlifter in here who been telling him since he started, like, all right, look, your ankle flexibility is shit. Like, we got to fix this. We got to fix this. We got to fix this. But he's young and he was progressing extremely fast and was not necessarily taking the flexibility work, too seriously. So the fact that his ankles wouldn't, move correctly, he was catching a lot of things directly on top of his knees. And, we can see it. We're like, look, we got to fix this. We got to fix this. And it was 6 months before his knees started bothering him.
Shocking.
Whereas whereas,
Shocking.
Any older clients I've ever had, it seems to be like if we do a squat, like that's a little out of position. They're just like, I can't do this anymore.
Yep. Yeah, no, exactly. You just get better feedback because of that. So, yeah, I mean, it's just about moving. It's not about moving. It's about moving well.
Right, yeah.
Especially as moving those things. And then once you move well, now we can start adding load. Now we can start adding speed. We can add dynamic movement. We can add heavy eccentric. We can add overload, fatigue, volume. I mean, you name it, but that's all predicated on moving well, especially for the general population.
Right. Okay, awesome. Now, to kind of cover another side of things, and then, like I said at the beginning, kind of bring it in full circle to weightlifting training, what do we know, or what are the different energy systems, and what do we know about them?
So, in terms of weightlifting specifically, you really only care about 1/1.5 of them. Okay,
and that was, I think, kind of getting into my next question with it, but of course, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so the primary one in the sport of weightlifting is going to be the ATP PCR, also known as the phosphocreatine system, which is basically a 1-to-1 exchange for one molecule of phosphocreatine, which is the same creatine that you get when you take creatine. This is where this idea came from. So you burn one of those, and then you make one molecule of what's called ATP, and the ATP is what your body uses for all energy. So the benefit of it is it's right in your muscle itself, and it's like a one-step equation. So you break one thing apart, you get energy, you're done. And so that's really nice because it's extremely fast. And this is why you need it for activities that are maximal strength, maximal effort for, something under 10 seconds or something like that.
Right.
So for a snatch or clean and jerk, I mean, you're looking at something in the neighborhood of 1 meter per second velocity, or hopefully better. But something like that. So you're literally talking 1 second, 2 seconds. Like, this is about as far as you're going to go. Maybe if you catch it clean and you got to take a breath or two before you jerk, I mean, you're still talking under 5 seconds usually. Right. Under 10 seconds, that's an extremely long time.
Yeah.
So that's all going to be in your ATP PCR system. The downside of it, though, is it's got very limited reserves. So you just don't have that much of it to use. And so where this becomes a problem for weightlifters is we'll have to sort of separate here training from competition. So in competition, you might slide into your next energy system if, for example, you have to follow yourself.
Right.
Or you have like one person go, then you have to go, and you got to be within 2 minutes. It typically takes your ATP PCR system 8 minutes or more to fully restore. So, I mean, I had this happen to me at the American Open a handful of years ago, where I went up, I missed my opening snatch, had to follow myself, and I wasn't prepared for it, and I was still trying to recover, had to go again, and I was nervous, and now like, oh my God, don't miss, plus I'm a little tired. Don't want to bomb out. All my friends drove down here. Like,
yeah.
I mean, all that, right? And so I missed the second one. Then I got to follow myself again, and now I'm just completely gassed.
Right, yeah.
And that's because I made the mistake of only training that ATP PCR system, and I didn't go into the next system at all, which is anaerobic glycolysis, glycolysis is a fancy way of saying sugar for energy. So I should have trained a little bit more, and so actually the next meet for me was national championships. I had focused a lot more on that, and when I walked into national championships, I was stronger, faster, I lifted more, and I was much fitter. So that was not a problem if I had to follow myself, which I had to one time, and I was fine.
Right. And that came primarily from you training both energy systems.
Exactly. So instead of just doing the one stuff where, like for example, for the American Open, I would snatch, sit down for 5 minutes, whatever.
Right.
Snatch, like in between reps, or maybe doing triples is the most I'd ever do. Things like that. Well, for national championships, that preparation, I set a clock. And I would do things like, hey, 10, 12, 15 sets of 1 or sets of 2 or whatever I was doing. And I would have a 2-minute running clock where I am pulling every 2 minutes.
Right. Okay, so that would be, like, just to generalize it, the two ends of that spectrum would be something like a Bulgarian training system or day where it's like you're taking a lift, you're waiting forever, you're taking a lift, and you're going maximally, versus something like an on-the-minute, snatch workout or something like that.
Right, yeah, and I was still going up to 100%. I was still trying to get maxes on the heavy days or whatever I was doing with those days, but I was just making sure my rest interval wasn't exaggerated. Now, I did a little bit of both, getting ready for national championships, so that I had that maximal strength and that maximal power. And I don't know, maybe I could have gotten stronger if I had more rest, but I wanted to make sure
you had the basics
I had to follow myself. Yeah, exactly. I didn't miss because I was tired, and I just didn't want that to happen.
Well, and that's competition readiness, because you don't know what's going to happen. Like that, and that's what I explain to people about weightlifting is like anybody can make a lift in training, but can you make it on demand? Like, can you make it when told to?
When you got one chance.
Right,
exactly.
Yeah. And, you know, did you have 90 seconds of rest? Did a couple people bump up and you just took your last warm-up and now all of a sudden, you missed it, we shouldn't bump up and now you got to go out? Like, or did it take too long and you got 4 minutes to sit down and then that's like not enough time to justify going back and doing something else? So, exactly. I think that makes total sense to me. I've never really, I guess I haven't thought about it in that way as far as energy systems go, which kind of like answers for the most part the kind of the follow-up question I had to that. But is there a downside as to being a specialist? Like in something like weightlifting, because it's not well-rounded, that you said like 1 to 1.5 energy systems. Is there a downside to that? Either, obviously performance-based, if you specialize in anything, you're not going to be good at anything else. But even like from a health perspective, anything, is there a downside?
Oh, from a health perspective? Yeah, I would say so. And this is an answer I would have not given you 5-10 years ago. I think there really is, because I noticed specifically once I kind of got done competing at the really high levels for myself for weightlifting, I had realized things. I'd sit around and I'd be like, I haven't done a sprint in 5 years.
Yeah.
like that's not good. You can't tell me you're a well-rounded, healthy human being if you haven't run in 5 years.
Right.
I had done so many things. You're like, I haven't bench pressed. That's one thing actually that I've gotten far more love for in the last couple of years. Mm-hmm. Like, I haven't bench pressed in 8 years. I haven't done all these things. I haven't done any footwork drills. I haven't done any reaction drills where I have to react to an external stimulus. Everything under weightlifting is under my terms, when I'm ready to go, when I set up. And I realized, oh my God, there's just so many things out here from a human movement perspective I have just totally missed. I hadn't put myself in any of these weird positions that just felt good. And I noticed that when I started doing jiu-jitsu and when I started doing MMA, I'm like, man, I haven't done anything like this in years. And like, that's just a problem. So I honestly think for a health perspective, I do think strength training is underrated. Mm-hmm. I think weightlifting specifically, or their variation movements, even maybe it's just a high pull or whatever it happens to be.
Just some kind of explosive heavy movement.
Yep,
basically.
That is highly underrated, and way more people need that than understand. But on the same token, if we're talking about general health, I think that every single person, for the most part, should be able to run for 30 minutes without being in crippling pain.
Yeah.
You should be able to row or cycle. I'm not talking 7 hours. I'm not saying you have to run a marathon, but if you can't go 30 minutes without taking a break, that's not healthy.
Yeah.
Right, but so I think people should probably have at least be able to touch the curtain on both ends of the spectrum here.
Yeah,
and then you can still emphasize the thing you like the most. But if it's been 3 years since you've ran for or cycled or swam for 30 straight minutes, and you're just trying to be healthy, that's probably not a good thing.
Yeah. Well, kind of funny story about that. I was taking my dogs for a walk not that long ago, and one of them, who was kind of like the puppy, was getting really, really tired.